At 6:43 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, I watched from my porch as a white Lexus SUV crashed nose-first into a pile of mulch, 2 inflatable flamingos, and my new decorative garden feature. I sipped my espresso and waved cheerfully at the driver. "Morning, Margaret. Like the new gate?" Margaret Hastings, our HOA president and self-proclaimed neighborhood harmony coordinator, kicked her car door open and climbed out in a rage. Her face turned 3 shades of purple as she screamed, "What kind of lunatic installs a trap gate?" I raised an eyebrow and took another sip of coffee. "Just responding to community feedback about property protection. Would you like some coffee while we wait for the police?" Let me back up and explain how we got here. My name is Daniel Morrison, and I'm a 36-year-old mechanical engineer who works from home. I moved to Willow Crest Circle in Pine Valley Estates about 3 years ago, mainly because I valued peace, quiet, and having a driveway that stayed empty for my deliveries and work equipment. The neighborhood was pleasant enough, a circular street with matching mailboxes and carefully maintained lawns. I kept to myself mostly, talking more to my collection of bonsai trees than to my neighbors. That suited me just fine until Margaret Hastings decided to make my life her personal project. Margaret was 58 years old and had been HOA president for 7 consecutive years. She ran the association like a military operation, complete with color-coded violation notices and what she called tactical neighborhood walks. She was famous for organizing mandatory Pilates flash mobs in the community center and measuring grass height with an actual ruler. The trouble started when I installed a simple keypad-controlled swing gate across my driveway. Nothing fancy, just a basic security measure to keep people from using my driveway as a turnaround spot or parking there during the frequent neighborhood gatherings Margaret loved to host. She appeared at my door within hours of installation, clipboard in hand and glasses perched on the edge of her nose. "This gate is an affront to our communal flow patterns," she announced without preamble. "It disrupts the aesthetic continuity of our circle and creates an unwelcoming atmosphere." I smiled politely. "It's on my property, Margaret. The HOA bylaws allow for security installations as long as they meet the approved color schemes, which this does." She tapped her pen against the clipboard with increasing aggression. "We'll see about that. This isn't over." I thought she was being dramatic. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, the HOA board called a special meeting about my gate. Margaret had prepared a 20-slide presentation titled, "Gates, the Silent Community Dividers." She argued that my gate represented, and I quote, "a philosophical rejection of neighborhood unity and an aggressive stance against spontaneous social interactions." The other board members looked uncomfortable as she ranted for 45 minutes about the symbolic violence of private property barriers. In the end, they voted that my gate was within regulations, though Margaret abstained in protest. That should have been the end of it. But Margaret didn't become HOA president by accepting defeat. I started noticing small acts of retaliation. My garbage cans would mysteriously tip over on collection day. Flyers for Margaret's Mindful Movement Mornings would be stuffed under my gate rather than in my mailbox. Once, I caught her measuring the exact distance from my gate to the property line at 5 a.m. with a laser measure. Then came the night that changed everything. I'd been away for a work conference and returned home to find my gate mangled beyond recognition. The metal was twisted and bent, with clear tire marks on the gravel showing someone had rammed it repeatedly. The electronic keypad hung by its wires, sparking occasionally in the morning dew. A hand-lettered note waited in my mailbox, written in Margaret's distinctive purple ink, "Parking isn't private in a true community. Consider this a teachable moment about the importance of access. MH." I installed security cameras that very day and filed a police report. When I brought the footage to the next HOA meeting, the board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "She was just reclaiming shared space," mumbled Jerome Patterson, the vice president. "Perhaps there was a misunderstanding about property boundaries." I pointed to the surveyor's map I'd brought. "My property line extends 3 feet past where the gate stood." She destroyed private property. Margaret sat at the head of the table, examining her manicured nails. I was making a statement about community values. Sometimes progress requires bold action. The board refused to take action, claiming it was a civil matter between neighbors. Fine. If they wanted to play games, I could play better. I spent the next week in my garage workshop, blueprints spread across every surface. I ordered motion sensors, pressure plates, and enough steel to build something special. My engineering background finally had a practical application in suburban warfare. The new gate looked identical to the old one from the street, same height, same color, same innocent appearance. But underneath lurked my masterpiece of defensive architecture. I'd reinforced the posts with concrete footings going down 4 feet. The gate itself was now steel core with a decorative aluminum shell. Most importantly, I'd installed a pressure-activated mechanism in the driveway approach. I tested it myself first, of course, safety was paramount, even in revenge. The system was designed to redirect force rather than stop it, with a pivoting base that would channel aggressive impacts into a specially prepared area of my yard. Margaret took the bait faster than I expected. 3 nights after I installed the new gate, my motion sensors alerted me to activity. I watched from my window as her white Lexus idled at the end of my driveway, headlights off. She revved the engine twice, building courage or momentum, then accelerated toward my gate. The next few seconds unfolded in beautiful slow motion. Her SUV hit the pressure plate at approximately 25 miles per hour. The gate's bottom hinge released as designed, pivoting downward to create a perfect ramp. Margaret's momentum carried her up and over, straight into what appeared to be a decorative Japanese garden but was actually a carefully engineered capture zone. The front wheels hit the concealed tire trap first, a net of aircraft cable hidden beneath a thin layer of mulch. The car lurched to a stop as the rear wheels spun helplessly, digging deeper into the strategically placed sand mixture. The airbag deployed with a satisfying pop, and through it all, my motion-activated lawn flamingos played a cheerful tropical melody. I called 911 immediately, maintaining a concerned citizen voice. Yes, there's been an accident at 457 Willow Crest Circle. A car seems to have driven into my garden. Please send help quickly. The police arrived within minutes, followed by a tow truck. Margaret emerged from her Lexus, covered in organic mulch and flamingo feathers from the decorative birds that had exploded on impact. She pointed at me with a shaking finger, screaming about entrapment and conspiracy. The officers reviewed my security footage, which clearly showed her deliberately ramming my gate after destroying the previous one. They examined the police report I'd filed earlier and read the threatening note she'd left. The situation became very clear very quickly as they placed Margaret in handcuffs for criminal mischief and trespassing. She kept screaming about her position and community standing. The officer reading her rights seemed unimpressed. The HOA board called an emergency meeting the next day. I arrived with a professional presentation titled, Gate Security, a case study in property rights and personal responsibility. I included time-stamped footage, police reports, and a cost breakdown of the damages. The board sat in stunned silence as they watched their president's repeated attacks on my property. The city attorney I'd invited explained the potential liability the HOA faced by enabling her behavior. The vote to remove Margaret from her position was unanimous. But the real consequences came at her arraignment. The judge reviewed the evidence with raised eyebrows, particularly the note admitting to the first attack. Margaret's lawyer tried to argue for community service, but the prosecutor pointed out the premeditated nature of the attacks and the thousands in property damage. The judge's gavel came down with finality. Margaret Hastings, you are hereby sentenced to 6 months in county jail, suspended pending 3 years of probation, 800 hours of community service, and restitution to Mr. Morrison in the amount of $12,400 for property damage and security upgrades. You are also banned from holding any HOA board position for 10 years. Margaret's face went white. She swayed on her feet, gripping her lawyer's arm. But I'm the HOA president, she whispered. I've been president for 7 years. Not anymore, the judge replied firmly. Perhaps this will be a teachable moment about respecting others' property rights. As the bailiff led her away to process her probation paperwork, Margaret turned to look at me one last time. Her carefully styled hair was disheveled, her power suit wrinkled, and her eyes held the shocked recognition that her reign of suburban terror had finally ended. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, seemingly realizing that for the first time in 7 years, she had no authority left to wield.